Hi, I'm Matt Collins. I'd like to welcome you to Bob Weber Auto Mart on Douglas Avenue here in Racine, across from Douglas Park. We specialize in 1-year-old, low mileage, almost new cars. And if you'd like to stop by and see them, or see them on our website, bobweberautomart.com, we could save you between $5,000 and $10,000 on your next almost new car purchase.
I'm Michael Burke, and this is Money Talks. Hi, Chris Gorman, owner of Racine Grain Co. Thanks for being our guest today on Money Talks. Really appreciate it. A really different kind of show. I'm looking forward to a little bit of foreign territory for me, so you'll have to help me with my understanding of things. Racine Grain Company out on Highway 45, just outside of Union Grove. And as I told you, my first impression driving up this long driveway is this just massive storage back here that I've never really noticed before. We'll get to that in a second.
Sure.
One of the most interesting things I learned about you in setting up this show is that you were not raised on a farm. So
correct.
How did you come to be immersed in farming as a business?
Well, my father was, and he started the company back in 1961, and we as the children and the kids kind of grew up as elevator brats, we like to say, and we had worked with him or helped him with certain things over the years and got an understanding of it a little bit that way. So we had appreciation. I think it was wonderful is that we had a lot of the country part of our aspect of our life, but we also grew up in the city, so I think I had the best of both worlds.
The city of Racine, actually.
Correct.
And by the way, when you say the term elevator, it's not the kind of elevator most people think of. You want to define that for us?
Sure. We use the term elevator by the fact that the grain is elevated in the air and then is dumped in different bends. And over the years, it just kind of evolved into the word elevator is what you kind of call facilities like this.
Referring to the entire facility.
Correct.
Yeah. Maybe we should let's start with some numbers and just get some sense of where your farming territory is. Where do you get grain from, and how much storage do you have, and what kinds of amounts are coming and going?
Sure. As far as territory, probably run from northern Illinois, probably west to Burlington, and maybe up to Oak Creek, Franklin type area. Kind of a semicircle in that area. A lot of what we do is transportation bound, so when you get too far away, there's other facilities that may be closer, and that's where the price difference and advantages come in depending on where you're at. As far as volume, we have about 3 million bushel of storage for a country truck elevator like ourselves. That's about normal. Maybe a little larger than some, but pretty much in the normal type area.
So at its core, you described to me that you said you buy and sell grain. Correct. So why don't we just talk about that business model a little bit for the city folks who might be watching this show.
Sure, I'll try to do my best. A lot of the area farmers raise a crop and then they can bring it here, and they have several things they can do with that. They can store it and hope for higher prices later, or they can sell it immediately on the market and get a check right away. It's even evolved to the point now where we can issue warehouse receipts where it's negotiable, where they can bring them to a bank or the government and actually get loans on the grain until they decide when to sell.
Sort of like taking out a loan on your house because it's collateral.
Correct. Yeah, the banks and financial institutions recognize the grain as being liquid enough to be a collateral for a loan.
Yeah. The types of grain, what's the mix of grains, and roughly volume percentage for you? Mostly
what we handle in the summer, in July, the winter wheat comes in. That's probably about 20 or 25% of what we do. Corn and soybeans both start around October and finish up by about Christmas, and that's about 40% of each of the other two. So
you got 80% coming in at the end of the year.
Pretty much October and November in a short period of time, yes.
Does that, even though 3 million bushels sounds like a lot of storage, I'm sure you're getting more than that coming at you. So how do you handle the fact that maybe you've got, I don't know what number it might be, but more than 3 million bushels coming in?
It's an excellent question, and sometimes we don't do it very well, but there are times when it can come in very, very quickly depending on how good the weather is, and sometimes it's hard for us to keep up, so we may have to cut hours back a little bit or actually pour some out on the ground to try to keep up. Other times where it rains, then we have the ability, when they're not picking or cutting soybeans or corn, we have the ability to quickly haul some stuff out and try to get a little bit more room. But over the 30 years or so, we've got it down to the point where we kind of have a pretty good feel of what we need to start and about where we're going to be. We also rely heavily on the farmers in about the middle of the summer to kind of give us an update. How does that crop look?
Yeah.
And some will tell me, hey, you better get ready, it's a big one, or hey, I don't have much this year, don't worry about it.
Well, how do you get ready for a bumper crop then? And corn was a bumper crop this year, right?
Yes, it was. Basically, you try to get as much stuff moved out in anticipation of a large crop coming. Check all your equipment, make sure the trucks are ready to go, so you're not spending a lot of time on maintenance that could have been done earlier prior to getting so busy.
Let's take those three kinds of grain just one at a time and talk about where they go and what they get used for. So you want to start with let's start with corn.
Corn, okay. Well, corn in our area, there's two major players we call either processors or end users. One facility is in Chicago that has a lot of processing of corn. They make corn starches and sweeteners. Another major place that we send to is up in Jefferson County, which is an ethanol plant. Everybody kind of understands the concept of the ethanol, but the corn is sent up there. They make alcohol or ethanol out of it, and that's the majority of our major areas where the corn goes.
Is it roughly divided half and half between the terminal and the ethanol
Yeah,
plant?
it's interesting. It's a great question, but it's our loyalty is to our customer, and whatever of those two places is paying more, so we can get it to the customers, is then determined where we go. And there are times when one's a little short or one's a little more comfortable that they move their bids around, and we just react accordingly. Who wants it the most that day?
Right now, what's the ethanol plant offering for corn, and what's the Chicago terminal
Just
offering?
split a little bit yesterday. The ethanol plant must be a little bit more happy or have enough stuff that they have right now because they dropped their bid about a dime. So Chicago, for example, is about $4.40 a bushel, and Jefferson is about $4.30 a bushel. We have to analyze that. It's about 10-cent difference. We know that it's about 7 cents more to go to Chicago than it is to go to Jefferson.
The transportation?
So even that quickly, when my mind knows right now that there's about a 3-cent advantage going to Chicago today versus Jefferson today. Now that can all change tomorrow. We don't know.
Sounds like a very slim advantage. Is that meaningful to the farmer?
Yeah, it is. A lot of this grain is traded on pennies. A penny per bushel can, based off of millions of bushels, can end up to be a lot of dollars.
So it sounds like the corn is pretty much all used domestically. How about soybeans?
Soybeans, for the most part, we load containers, which end up going overseas. The containerized shipments came for us about 5 or 6 years ago. We load them in the containers. A lot of people see them on the highways or on rail cars. And they end up, the ones that we're currently loading end up going to Taiwan.
So, trace the journey for us then. It goes out of here on a truck, a container sitting on a truck. And by the way, what are the size of these containers?
Well, there are two main that we use. They're 20-footers and 40-footers. Depending on who orders them over there, that's what they'll tell us to load.
And they go out on a flatbed truck?
And our trucks, yeah, they go out on a flatbed trailer type situation where the container is loaded. We end up bringing these, currently are going to Chicago, which is put on a rail car and sent all the way to the West Coast, whether it be San Diego or Vancouver or something out that area. Then they're put on ships and they end up going over to Taiwan.
And do you know what sorts of uses they are?
I think over there, once they're unloaded, I think they break them up and probably go to processing plants similar, maybe some type of tofu, or soybeans can be used for thousands of different products. So it's.
I assume soy sauce?
Probably, yes. Very good.
Yeah, and you had mentioned also they can even be used somehow as a material for plastics?
Yeah,
or
it'd
something
be
like that?
interesting. People might want a chance to Google soybeans and their uses, but you'll be amazed at the different types of things. Plastics, cosmetics. Just tremendous. It's an oil-based product, so it has a lot of things it can be used for.
Oh yeah. And now, so roughly what share of the soybeans are going overseas?
Currently for us, I'd say about 90% of them.
Really?
Almost all of them are getting shipped that way. And again, it goes back to what you asked earlier. It's right now there's a price advantage just for the loaded containers over just shipping them domestically here.
You mentioned there's a 7-cent margin that you got to take off when you ship corn to Chicago. It must be a tremendous transportation cost to get them to Taiwan, right? So what's the price differential there?
We don't know all the intricacies of all the loops through it, but I have heard in the corn case sometimes a $3 to $4 corn, it's that again to get it there.
Oh yeah.
So sometimes we think that, oh, they're buying this corn pretty cheap, but if you add their freight on it and almost double the price, you start to understand it's pretty expensive for them to get it.
Of course, soybeans can be used domestically too. Animal
Correct.
feed is just one obvious
Correct.
example.
Yep.
The foreign market is offering that much more that it makes sense to absorb all that transportation cost, and it still makes sense for you guys to ship it then. Huh?
Yeah, I think their diets are exploding over there, and they want the better products. And for years, both China and Taiwan have imported a lot of soybeans.
And just for the heck of it, what are they selling for right now?
Soybeans in our area about $13 a bushel.
Oh wow.
So it was quite a bit higher about 2 years ago because there was about a 5-state drought problem. But southeast Wisconsin was very fortunate. We didn't have that. We caught some rains and we actually had products. So our local people had a benefit of both very good prices and a good crop. So
Yeah.
we're very fortunate.
Now how about winter wheat? Where does that go, and what is it used for?
Most of
Obviously, we
ours-
eat wheat in a
Yeah.
lot of different ways.
There's several types of wheat, and most of what we have is called soft red winter, and we send that basically into a processor in Chicago. And from my understanding is they mostly are making cookies and bakery goods out of that.
I had asked you about this before, but there's a growing awareness of gluten intolerance in some people in the U.S. population. Is that affecting wheat prices?
I think it has, maybe not so much as exact wheat, but as far as our local processors, I think they've cut back on the amount of wheat that they need. A lot of places don't buy 100% of what we have. They only buy, obviously, what they need. And one of these local markets in Chicago have gotten to the point where I think they're slowing down their grind, is what we would say. They're not using as much.
Now, when you're selling as a part of your business, are you always making the decisions who to sell to and when to sell, or are farmers, how involved are farmers in that equation?
Very involved. It depends on where you live a lot of times. A person in Waukesha might have a little different freight advantage going up to that ethanol plant in Jefferson like we meant versus somebody in Zion, Illinois who's closer to Chicago. So I think over the years it's gotten very, very good for me to know who I'm talking to, and I know their tendencies and where they would like to go, if they have their own truck or don't, and those type of things. So very involved. But normally you know your customer and you understand what he wants.
And how are you obtaining your prices? Is this just all from a computer screen, or are you also talking to people to find out? And is there ever any negotiating?
Yeah, lots of negotiating.
Is that right?
Yes.
That's
computer
kinda cool.
screens. Yeah, the computer screens send out signals of what the Chicago Board of Trade tells pretty much everybody in the world what they think grain is worth. Now everybody takes that to where they live and says, for example, hey, I've got a boat today that I've got to leave by Friday or tomorrow. He may be willing to pay a little bit of a premium versus what the Board of Trade says, but as soon as he gets the boat covered, then he's out. And the next guy may, hey, I've got a train that's not finished yet, I got to get that done.
Wow.
So a lot of my job is to monitor what the Board of Trade's saying and then take it to the local level and say who's got the boat, who doesn't have a train, or in those situations make a difference on where you sell for that day.
So you're making deals order by order, basically.
Correct.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Individual by individual, depending on where they live, where they want to go, what their tendencies are.
So when you know you have to fill a boat, and I assume you mean a shipping a ship heading to China or something like
Correct.
that, are you selling then one individual farmer's grain, or are you?
That's
or
a good
whose grain
question.
are you selling?
It's a good question, and at that point, the transfer of ownership is when a farmer may sell us grain, and we can maybe accumulate larger quantities and then make the order on the other end. So it can be a single person, or it could be a bunch of people put together, depending on the quantities that we're selling or buying.
Wow, a lot of different permutations of deals then.
Correct.
Finally, you cover a wide area here, you serve a wide area, but you're not the only player in Racine County. There's, and not only is there one other place that does this kind of business, but it's actually a cooperative. We're talking about Landmark Services.
Correct.
Cooperative out in Burlington.
Correct.
You and I talked about this a little bit, but it's very much like you're a bank and you're trying to compete against a credit union,
Right.
which is returning the profits to its members. So how are you able to compete against a credit union?
Well, I think...
a cooperative, rather.
Right. Well, I think a couple things. The tendency here is it's a family-run company, and you're going to end up calling somebody who's been here for a long time and you understand. I think sometimes the cooperative base changes people a little more frequent than what we do.
So some of it is just sort of customer loyalty?
Yeah, I think so. It's, you know, built up your loyalty over the years, and part of it's location and hours and speed and
being good at what you do?
Our employees are very good. Well, I think it took a great opportunity and just tried to make it better. That's about all.
Is there another generation that's going to own this company?
I hope so, but we've had a few of the kids come through, and I'm not real sure. Sometimes people say, be patient, maybe the second time through might be a little differently. But right now, we're not real sure. We got, my wife and I have 3 children, and they're all wonderful, doing very, very well, so we'll see what happens.
All right, well, good luck. I hope it carries into a 3rd generation. Chris Gorman, owner of Racine Grain Company, thanks a lot for being on Money Talks. Thanks to our producer, Greg Shaver, and please watch us again.
Hi, I'm Matt Collins. I'd like to welcome you to Bob Weber Auto Mart on Douglas Avenue here in Racine, across from Douglas Park. We specialize in 1-year-old, low mileage, almost new cars. And if you'd like to stop by and see them, or see them on our website, bobweberautomart.com, we could save you between $5,000 and $10,000 on your next almost new car purchase.